All right, I'm here today with head boys basketball coach of the Bismarck High School Demons, of course, both of our alma maters, and we'll, of course, get to more of that in a second. Coach Jordan Wilhelm joins me today. We actually have similar childhoods based on the feeder system in schools we attended, but he was much more into the basketball community. I was some football, baseball. Obviously, we intermixed quite a bit of them here and there, but you know, I wasn't going to dive too deep into your upbringing. I was going to more focus on your coaching philosophy, your kind of the culture, which I'll dive into a little later. With obviously you took over the program from a legend that had been there for a very long time, so I would love to get into the culture aspect of that, and just again your perspective, your coaching style. I know, again, you're a younger guy coaching high school basketball, so it's probably looks and sounds a lot different than some of the guys you coach against. And I actually want to start a little early on. I know when I listen to your podcast, and for our listeners and viewers, Coach Jordan Wilhelm has his own podcast, and it's been a lot. It's been very enjoyable for me to listen to because I know a lot of the people, I know a lot of the names, and a lot of the experiences and stories that they told on yours are somewhat relatable to me because I've also lived through a few of those along the way. But kind of connecting to your podcast you did with Dexter Warner, who is a pretty well-known name around the Bismarck area as being a very well-known Bismarck Demon, and later on a Bison over at North Dakota State. But when you were coaching early on, and you again talked about in your own podcast when you were coaching Dexter's younger teams with Dexter and the Frazies, and I think Cody Ward was on that team. But at such a young age, I mean, you were probably a teenager still back then, and they're coaching like 10 and 11-year-old like talent. This isn't just to piece together a basketball team and go play some tournaments. There were some guys who panned out to be some dudes on this team. So what did you learn from such an early age coaching, not just traveling ball, but having talent and skill at every practice and every game around you?
Well, I could go about a million ways with this. What an intro. I appreciate you having me on. I've been looking forward to it since you mentioned that we were going to get together. I've been enjoying your podcast as well. You do a great job. Enthusiasm is our jam. Let's get after it.
Thanks, man.
So, yeah, when I was a senior in high school, actually, a couple that my mom did their hair had a son who was in Dexter's grade and played on Dexter's traveling team. And they reached out, as a local athlete, they wanted me to do individual skill development with them. So we started meeting up at the Y, and I was doing individual workouts with them, stuff I learned from Coach Miller and from my AAU coach, Coach Steve Grabowski, and developed a relationship there. And when they decided to find a coach for their traveling team, they reached out to me to coach the team. I said, sure, I'd love to. I had coached camps for Coach Steve Miller for 2 or 3 years, and I knew I wanted to go into education and coaching. So I figured it'd be a awesome experience for me to coach a traveling team. I didn't really know what the talent level was going to be. I didn't know what I was going to be handed. Come to find out that I was given a very, very talented team, one of which ended up with several college athletes, several all-state athletes. Got to know Dexter Warner pretty well, and it ended up becoming my first team. Very, very good team. I remember, early on, I got a hold of Dex, and he was just this chubby little sixth grader with those big cheeks and just those stiff legged running up and down. And, the first time I saw him, I remember people telling me how dominant he was. I'm like, well, we'll see. And I think we got to that first tournament, and he pulled down like 30 rebounds or 35 rebounds in the first game I had him. And just extremely dominant. I used to just, I was young and dumb. I would just yell at the refs, and I was on my feet, and I was these sixth grade tournaments looking back now, like, what the heck was I doing? But I used to get so frustrated because Dexter wouldn't do anything. He'd just get the ball and drop step, and like kids would fall over and he'd get called for fouls. It's like, it's not his fault that he's a big sixth grader. Like, get off. It's not his fault. But very, very cool experience for me. So I got to do that for 2 or 3 years. And that's actually, where our relationship kind of starts. I had a chance to coach your big brother too. So my first 2 teams are extremely talented. I got a chance to coach Jaron's team too later on. So I coached the Bullets, then eventually coached the Hurricanes, which had Jaron and Sam Neubauer and John Thoraldson,
yep.
Justin Fleck. So had a chance to coach 2 pretty talented teams, had success with both of them, won a junior Grand Am title with both of them. Very cool first experience for me to kind of take over some pretty successful teams, and just get thrown to the fire. No experience other than coaching some camps, and let's learn, let's hang out. And you're right, I was 5 years older than those guys. So Dex was a 2012 grad, I'm a 2007 grad. So I was a senior, they were in 7th grade, I suppose, when I took over. So 5 years apart. So although I was their mentor and their coach at the same time, you're close enough in age to where now Dexter and I have actually become extremely good friends. We talk almost every day. And Tanner Parenton, someone who coached on my staff for 4 years and is now the AD at St. Mary's, and developed a lot of relationships even from that first team that I had.
So cool to see how all these guys pan out, not just their talent and skill wise, but I know Dexter's doing play-by-play type stuff for the Bison. You mentioned, Tanner Purinton won a state football title as a head coach in Linton after some time at BHS. So, and I know I'll eventually get to the same age group you're currently in, but even from these guys who aren't even 30 years old yet, to see all these guys getting hired in spots and doing so well for themselves and really sharing the love of the game that they grew up gaining. I should take a step back. I know I mentioned talking a lot tonight about coaching and your kind of coaching philosophy. Obviously, you are the head boys basketball coach at Bismarck High, and we'll get to kind of the guy that you took over for just a few years ago. And from my own perspective, it's very different, but also, again, what builds curiosity in myself to hear from you, because I have 5th and 6th grade football in the BYFL, and I do some coaching up at Legacy with baseball with Eddie Streeter. So have high school kids, but JV is probably a little different animal, especially the 2 different sports. So just another reason I love diving into all these coaching philosophies from different people, different age groups. And I know a lot of your podcast is built around getting those perspectives and cultural ideas from all sorts of guys. So starting kind of, not so much in your childhood, but as we mentioned, you are a former Demon, just like myself, over at Bismarck High. Can you talk a little bit about any highlighted experiences or stories or anything you learned as a player, not necessarily yet as a coach? We'll get to the coaching part later, but as a player under Coach Steve Miller. Of course, he's an absolute legend. You can drop his name anywhere in Bismarck and people know who he is and know what he's done for Bismarck High. But can you kind of talk about any highlighted experiences or anything that you learned regardless of what it was as a player for under Coach Steve Miller?
Well, we could probably go for about an hour just with Steve Miller stories. I think if you three-way Perry Hansen into this thing, we could probably go for about 6 hours, because the guy is, he's been doing it for so long, and all the success he has, it didn't happen by chance. But at the same point, he's a character, and he's someone that, I could tell so many stories just that, but I'm going to start with just the philosophy that I gained from him. And I think the number one thing that I learned from Coach Steve Miller was how to play hard and what it truly means to play hard. I went from playing 7th grade and 8th grade ball at Horizon to in 9th grade being thrown into a JV varsity setting with guys like Weston Dressler, Jordan Englehart. Jordan Englehart is a 2-time All-Stater. Weston Dressler is a Hall of Famer in the Canadian Football League, probably the best athlete I've ever been on the court with. And going from 8th grade ball to where I was the tallest and most skilled and one of the better players, in the city, to being in 9th grade, the eye-opening experience, making that jump. And I truly didn't know what it meant to play hard, because I was always bigger and more skilled, and I probably put more time into the game. But at the same point, I didn't really truly know how to sit down in a stance and how to compete and what it really means like to compete at a JV varsity level. So I think that's the number one thing that he instilled in me, was how to work hard and how to hold people accountable. And there were times I'd get frustrated at practice because I felt like I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, and everything that was asked of me, I was doing it, and he's still getting after you. And you realize that there are levels that you need to push yourself to that you probably didn't know that you had. And I think that was one thing about Steve that he did a great job of, is getting everything that he could out of his athletes. And then also with that, he was always did a great job of surrounding himself with great coaches. I had guys like Matt Thornton and Darren Mattern that were on the staff when I was there as well. And now Darren has gone on to win a couple state titles at Century, and Matt Thornton, there's just 2 guys that know so much about the game and can teach you the specific details. And you talk about defensive rotations. For the most part, when you talk about Steve, it was, the philosophy and how you defend in the half court and what does it mean to get to the help side? What does it truly mean to sit down and guard people. And although I'm sure there'll be a lot of people listening to this podcast, listening to me talk about defense, because that was not probably my MO as a player, still isn't my MO as a player. It is definitely something that was instilled in me through Steve Miller. And definitely when I went to become, the coach of those two traveling teams, and when I eventually took over for Steve Miller, I knew that I wanted to build my base and my program and what I did around what he did. And that's starting on the defensive end, because as cliche as it sounds, there are so many nights where the ball is just not going to fall and the ball is not going to drop. And when you get into a big moment and a big stage and it gets a little tight, guys aren't going to shoot as high a percentage. So how can you hold other teams down? So definitely that mentality of playing defense and holding people accountable. And the other thing that Steve did a really nice job of was creating relationships. I think that was even his strength as a teacher. I think a lot of his students, just his ability to communicate, his ability to, your last name is Olson. You have an aunt and uncle from Strasbourg. Well, I knew a person from Strasbourg, and I met him at the meat market back in '74. He just has a way of like making you feel like everybody, like you have some connection with them no matter what it is. So I think his ability to build relationships, I definitely took a lot of that. And then, I could get very detail oriented with some of the things I learned from him, but overall just holding people accountable, running a successful program, building from the defensive side first. But a whole lot, like I said, we could go into a rabbit hole about, all the things I learned from Steve Miller and Mark Gibson and guys like that, because they did it the right way and the success did not happen by accident.
I was just going to say, you name dropped again right at the end there. It sounds a whole heck of a lot like Coach Mark Gibson doing all the little things right. And again, a guy that I've played for and you've even had the opportunity to play for in your time at Bismarck High, but just doing the little things right and expecting a lot from yourself, expecting a lot from your teammates. I was actually talking about him a few weeks ago to some other football people with just never being satisfied with anything. I think somebody at school told me, you're just never satisfied with anything. Where do you get that from? I'm like, from my parents, but I think the first name outside of my family that I kind of try to think of, so I'm not too original with just talking about my parents all the time, is Coach Mark Gibson. And I'm sure you can relate to the stories of going to play the Willistons or the Dickinsons of the world when you're up 60-0 at halftime. And
dude, I got to say,
and the freshmen and sophomores, and sophomore O-lines come in and he is ripping them a new one on the sideline. We're up 65. I'll never forget back-to-back years, because my brother, who you know well as well, Jaron Olson, their senior year, when they were pretty loaded team with a lot of football talent, they went up to Williston. I still remember, because my dad and I both started laughing, and neither of us had to say a word about what we were laughing about, because it's 60-0 at halftime, and Coach Gibson is ripping a bunch of sophomores a new one on the bench because two of them missed assignments and we're not done playing yet. So,
well, that game is the one I was going to talk about. I'll never forget it as long as I live, because I was on the staff, and that was the game that we went no huddle and they allowed Hayden to call the plays. So Mark didn't call the plays, and I was in the headsets for down and distance with Coach Gibson for all the games, and he let Hayden call the plays, and he had our entire coaching staff convinced that we were going to get smoked that game. And I remember like looking around the room, and we had such a good team, and I'm like, guys, are you crazy? Am I taking crazy pills? We're not going to lose this game. And then they all get mad at me like, what do you mean? We're not, these guys are so good and they're so big. And then we're up. I think Hayden threw 4 touchdowns in the first quarter, and I was in the headsets with Mark, and of course I'm feeding it to him a little bit like, well, I think you got to think about who's calling the plays here. Should you be calling the plays, or your son? It was just, obviously teasing, but definitely a memory that sticks out for me coaching under Coach Gibson, because and a lot of people, I think, they believe that he's putting on a show or that he's saying it because this is coach talk, this and that, but that's what motivates him. That's what drives him. He truly believes. And when you watch film and you watch another team and you see all the positives that other teams do, that's what drives him. And I've learned a lot over the years with the players that I've coached, one being Trayson Eaglestaff. He has that exact same DNA. We'd be going into games and he'd be doing the same thing. We're not good enough. We're not going to win. And I used to get so frustrated with it. And then when you find out that that's just how some people are motivated and that's how some people are wired, it's not how I'm wired. But when people are motivated that way, I think that's the best way to get the most success out of it. And that's how Coach Gibson's motivated. So as much as I tease him about it, I do understand that is just how he's wired. And it's been successful for him.
Correct. And of course, that doesn't just translate to a football field or a basketball court. It translates to everything you do in life, which is again why these guys that we're talking about have been and continue to be so successful. So we start at your career at BHS again under Coach Miller. You head out to University of Mary and start your career as a Marauder. I still remember going to your guys' playoff game in the MAC when Moody was around. And I believe I remember sitting courtside with my parents, and you had what, 4 3-pointers to start the game. I think you guys went up 12-0 straight out of the gates, and all 12 points were 3-pointers from Jordan Wilhelm. I'm pretty sure that's a pretty accurate statement because I mean it should be accurate because I was there. But I know, again, you talked about this with Dexter, and I mentioned that because I kind of laughed at your guys' stories because, again, they're very, very relatable for people who have been through and attended those first college practices. But as you go out to the hill out at UMary as a Marauder, do you have any welcome to college level moments? And as your eyes get big, I'm sure you have plenty to share, but are there any experiences or moments that really stand out with people that might have heard plenty of stories like this before, but don't truly understand what it is like to go from kind of a pretty solid athlete in high school to welcome to, and it doesn't even have to be. What I enjoyed about you and Dexter's conversation was he goes to NDSU, a pretty solid program, Division I, been to the NCAA tournament. It doesn't matter if you go to NDSU or whether you show up at Division II practice out at Mary or whether you are out at BSC. No matter where you go, there's still moments like this because a lot of guys show up and say, all right, here we are. Let's play some pickup basketball. Let's play some baseball. And a lot of guys have moments like this that you go, whoa, I have some growing up to do that I didn't realize I needed.
Yeah, I got a couple. I got one for sure as like an individual, welcome to the league kind of moment. And one more in a team concept. And you're right, Dexter did a great job of articulating that. And I already mentioned a little bit my jump to the high school, how it was like Holier on the court with Weston Dressler and Jordan Englehart, a 2-time All-Stater. And then making that next jump is exactly the same because everybody that, comes to a college campus, they all come as the big man on campus from their high schools. So everybody comes in with that mentality that you're going to continue what you had going in high school. And, my one memory that really sticks out is the summer between my senior year and freshman year. I show up for an open gym out there, and a guy by the name of Jeff West, who was the starting point guard, I played with him for 2 years. I get matched up with him in transition. He comes down, he's attacking me, and he gave me his patented in and out cross that I didn't know was his patented move at the time. And I remember as soon as he hit me with the in out, I kind of went to cut him off, and he crossed so fast back that he was head and shoulders by me, laying it in before I could even turn my head. Okay, so all right, I got it. Next possession coming down, he's attacking me. I'm laying off. I'm ready for the in and out cross, and then he stops in a dime and hits one right in my grill and just feeding it to me. And I remember leaving that open gym and calling my parents and saying, like, there's no way I'm going to play here. There's no way that I can play at University of Mary. Like, if this team won 7 games last year and this is the lead guard and, this guy isn't even an All-American, I felt like he was the best player I've ever seen. Like, just absolutely torched me. And again, just, getting used to that speed and the athleticism and everything that comes with being a college athlete. And then fast forward to the end of my freshman year, and it was the first year that UMary was D2 eligible, and we get matched up in the first round against number 1 in the country, defending national champion Winona State. And I mean, talk about intimidation. We're sitting there, we come out, they're announced starting lineups, and we're standing there waiting for the tip. And you look across, all the lights are out, and they introduce them one by one. All the lights are out, spotlights out. They have packed house. There's 3,000 people there. And they go through every single player's accolades one by one before they announce it. Instead of like at a guard, Jordan Wilhelm, it was 6'4" guard, Jonte Flowers, 4-time All-Conference, 3-time All-American, 2-time National Defensive Player of the Year. And like the starting lineup takes 25 minutes, and then they walk out, you look across, and we're like, we got no shot here. We got beat by 50. I think it was 95-45, and it was just like, yeah, this is a different level, man. Like, if we want to meet our goals the next few years and we want to turn this thing around at Mary, we're going to have to figure some stuff out. So there's 2 stories from my freshman year. Yeah,
little intimidating to walk into that. Ooh, I as I look at college, I think when I was 18, we went to the Senior Babe Ruth World Series because I never played Govs because I was a pitcher and I didn't really want to travel around the state all summer and just sit in the dugout with all my friends. As much fun as just watching baseball summer sound, there are other things I wanted to do with my summer. So I actually played reps with a bunch of guys, and it was one of the best summers ever. We won state. We didn't actually win regionals, which some people don't know. Obviously, you have to win regionals to go to the World Series, but the team that hosted it won it, but they had football season, and so their guys like weren't able to go to the World Series. So we went to the World Series. So most of my welcome to the next level stories are really not even from Mary, even though I have several. Most of them are in the weight room, to be honest with you. But I remember going to the World Series and I mean, throwing curveballs where you usually throw curveballs and guys are just waiting for it. I don't know if you probably know Troy Olson. He's the baseball coach at Century. He coached head hockey coach over at Century. He was our coach. And I remember Jared Spooner catching for me in the game. And I mean, it's 110 degrees out in tiny little Weimar, Texas. And I was pitching against the eventual champions who all look like they're 25 years old. They all got chew in their mouths. They're all just walking around like they own the place. But I remember, I don't even remember what the count was, but Troy yelled at Spoonie to basically throw one off the ground, and it was about that far off the ground. He almost hit it off the scoreboard. So I just remember him yelling he didn't even yell at me. He yelled at Spooner. He said, "I told you to throw that one in the dirt." And he's like, "It pretty much was in the dirt." But
well, it's good he was yelling at you guys. Usually he's yelling at me sitting behind the dish as the umpire. So at least he was.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he had a lot of knowledgeable stuff. He was yelling at you. So
I like it.
I love going to watch Ole coach reps in the summer because his signs are the same they've been for 25 years. So I can literally sit in the bleachers with parents and former players. Oh, here comes a squeeze. Or how do you know this? Like, he hasn't changed his signs in 25 years. They're the exact same as they've always been. But I would say that most of my college ones are in a weight room because I'm this 6'1", 160-pound scrawny kid that, I mean, did plenty of weights at BHS, but not a whole lot of taught or structure type stuff. But so we moved from your career as a Marauder, you inch your way back into BHS. Of course, you were an assistant coach for a while under Coach Miller. So kind of reflecting back on your player experiences versus working under Miller, what were some things that you might have noticed as an assistant that as a player you don't really think about as a teenage high school player under Coach Miller? You, of course, got a really good opportunity to coach and not just play underneath Steve Miller. But what were kind of some of the experiences or some aha moments, like you knew or saw it as a player, but it didn't really click the importance or the value of it until you coached under him from a very different perspective, of course, player versus coach. But can you talk about kind of coaching under Coach Miller as you grew up and moved on from your time at Mary?
Yeah, man. So coming back onto the staff, I obviously came in with a ton of new ideas, and the things I learned from Coach Pintar and then from Coach Herbst out at Mary, I had all these ideas, and I was going to be, we're going to be super specific on ball screen coverage, and we're going to guard different things different ways, and we're going to do all these different half court sets. And right away, he kind of put me in my place as, you got to remember where you came from. Like, we run motion offense, we play half court defense, we do, because this is what the program was based on. And did he let me have some fun and let me instill some of my stuff? Of course he did. But at the same point, it's like, this is the program and this is the pride and the tradition that comes with Bismarck High. When it comes to some specific things that I learned from him, one thing that I really love the way he did is the way he handled parent meetings, little things like the way he handled player meetings. When deciding your final roster and you need to make cuts on the last day, which is easily the day I have circled as the worst day of the year, because I hate having to tell kids that they're not going to be able to continue their high school career. The way he handled those situations, everything man to man, everything face to face. We're not putting things on a board. We're going to handle things between me and you. We're going to talk this out, very direct. I think a lot of the things that he did in our program, there's a reason that he was so successful, and that was because, it was a no BS type program, and this is what we're going to do, and you're going to become a part of our program. And the one thing that he always talked a lot about was how the name on the front of your jersey was so much more important than the name on the back of your jersey. And the tradition of Bismarck High, and how you're playing for the guys next to you. You're playing for the guys that came before you. You're playing for the maroon and white and the pride and the tradition. And I think he took that very seriously, and definitely getting back on staff. A lot of it I already knew, but being able to see it, firsthand was very fun for me to get behind the scenes, to have those conversations with him as far as talent evaluation. And then even like decisions that you make down the stretch, as an assistant, it's easy sometimes to just make comments like, that kid can't do this, or he can't do that, or the senior, you make comments as an assistant because you don't really a lot of times look at the full spectrum of a decision. And as a head coach, Steve Miller always did a great job of explaining to me, if you make this decision, this is what's going to happen because of it, and making sure to look at the whole picture before you just kind of snap and make decisions. So a lot of things, you come in as a young guy and you don't realize that there's so much more perspective to being a head coach and running a program than just coaching a practice and coaching a game. You're part-time web developer, you're part-time psychiatrist, you're part-time, you're the bus scheduler, you're the parent liaison, you're the media liaison, everything that comes along with being a head coach. So watching him juggle that, watching him lean on his assistants, leaning on me and leaning on Rich Hovland, was fun for me to see just the way he went about his business. And same with Coach Mark Gibson. I coached under him for 5 years too. And the both of them, just watching the way they handle the program, the way they talk to their athletes, and the way that they just, like I mentioned earlier, man, that the success isn't an accident. When you hold your kids accountable, when you speak openly and clearly, when you give structure within your program, success is going to come with it. And definitely had a chance to learn firsthand on that. And I think Steve he wanted me to be the next head coach at Bismarck High, and he told me early on that he wanted me to take over. So I think he probably communicated with me differently than he had a lot of his coaches, because he wanted me to learn from him as much as I could, because he wanted to be able to turn the keys over eventually. So pretty special for me to play under a guy like that, to learn from him, and then to coach under him, and then eventually be able to take over a special program like Bismarck High. Very cool experience.
I appreciate that a lot, because I see a lot of that in Eddie Streeter up at Legacy for baseball. And I know a lot of young people don't like to hear honesty. I don't know if it's a generational thing. That's again a whole conversation for a whole nother day. Oh, it's the parents. Did they learn this at home? It's the generation. It's kids don't want to work hard. Kids don't like honesty. Whatever you want to call it, based on whatever your opinion might be. But I appreciate everything you just said about him, because it sounds like a lot of coaches that I've already been able to work with at a young age, but you take so much away from that, as you just mentioned. Like I said, Eddie is very honest and upfront, no matter where he is. And some people, some adults or some kids don't even like that. But I've learned being around him, being that way, it solves a lot of your problems right there. And it just shows the kind of coach and person you are. And you also notice, just through observation, as your high school age kids get older, and some of them even go play at the college level, how much they appreciate coaches being like that. But again, they just get used to it, and they learn why coaches are like that. But I know, just again through my own observations, a lot of talent we've had at Legacy, when they come back, you can see how much they appreciate Eddie for who he is, because they understand where he's coming from in that angle. So
they don't understand right away. They don't get it
no.
a lot of times, but those are the fun conversations. That's my favorite part of coaching, is when your alumni come back and they verbalize those things, and they thank you for what you did for them, and they appreciate the fact that you weren't beating around the bush. And I'm sure Eddie's that way too with his alumni. When they come back, I've had several conversations. One in particular, Stanley Jones, a kid that played for us at Bismarck High. I'll never forget. He came back after his freshman year, shut the door, walked in my office, and he was in tears, basically just appreciative of what we did for him at Bismarck High. Not just me, but Coach Gibson, Coach Miller, all of us. Didn't realize what he had until it was gone. He loved playing for the Bison, loved how he was pushed, but just the communication factor, once you're in college, is much different than when you are in high school, because you can now be replaced. They can now recruit over you, and now everybody is as talented as you. So I think a lot of times the communication at these, and it's probably changing now, with the transfer portal. I'm guessing a lot of that sort of communication has changed, but definitely those conversations are fun to have when guys come back and can, verbalize what they took from your program and what they missed from your program and those sorts of things.
Now, I can also say that's true for a lot of young people too, because being most of my career, fourth grade, but also some fifth grade last year, I love when the formers come back, or when Wachter Show Choir or Wachter Band comes and visits Lincoln, or BHS kids, because now I have Lincoln kids who are freshmen and sophomores, so I'll have some Demons mixed in there because I've been at Lincoln long enough. But when they come back, and you again can see it's everywhere, and they eventually figure out what you were doing had a reason to it. It wasn't just Mr. Olson was angry about something that day.
It's the best, man.
So I've enjoyed that a lot as a teacher, as I now have students who are old enough to start understanding that. I don't have a senior class yet. I think my oldest ones are juniors in Hazen, but we're getting there. I'm getting old, man. I'm gonna be old as you guys here pretty soon.
Yeah, you're telling me. Yeah, you're mentioning I'm a young coach in the league. I'm like the second or third most tenured coach in the league right now, man. I used to have to take notes my first few years, like the notes when we had our WA meeting. Now I got the new guys doing it. Yeah, that's no longer. I'm now one of the older guys in the league as far as tenure goes.
Time goes by fast.
Yep.
So into the goods of more coaching and culture, you become the head coach at BHS. I don't know, how many years have you been the head guy at BHS?
This will be my 8th season as the head coach. It'll be my 12th year coaching overall, because I had 4 under Steve. Now this will be my 8th year as the head.
So you've been the head coach since I had a teaching career, which is crazy. Somebody the other day didn't even believe that I'd been teaching for 8 years, but they've been teaching a whole lot longer than I have. So maybe that's why the number snuck up on them. So, so looking at you again, as we've mentioned several times, come in and you take over for a legend, a guy who's done things the right way, a guy who's been a staple in the state basketball tournament. I know we could talk about how many times BHS was at the state tournament. I know there were so many people when BHS missed the state tournament towards the end of Coach Miller's tenure at BHS, and a lot of people said it's not the same Class A state tournament without Steve Miller walking courtside. So when you took over, did you feel any pressure? Were you nervous? Were you excited? Was there eagerness? What were your feelings? I know you mentioned that you had a very strong feeling that when you worked for Coach Miller, that there was very strong thoughts of his and ideas that when he left, you were going to take over. So maybe that might have played into your feelings about the whole situation. But what were your feelings as you kind of stepped into his shoes and took over an entire basketball program?
I think the overriding feeling was excitement, man. As you know, going to Bismarck High and being a part of the culture, I always knew I wanted to come back and coach and take over at some point. And I think the overriding feeling was just excitement. Now, when I reflect on it, and when I think about 8 years ago, when I was 26 years old, taking over a program for a legend like Steve Miller, should there not have been more emotions? Yeah, I should have probably felt more stress and more anxiety and more, but I felt ready, after spending 4 years with them and the relationships that I had built within the program, and even the alumni that had come through, like the Luke Kellers and the Justin Flex, and like Stanley Jones coming back into my office, Dexter Warner, like being able to go to his, I was at the game when they qualified to go to the first national tournament. Like the relationships I had built before that, and the respect I thought that I had built from our past alumni and from people that had played prior, the guys that I had played with, I feel like it was a situation where I could handle taking over that program. So I really did feel prepared. And I think that's why the overriding feeling was excitement. Was there some pressure? Of course there was. After Steve Miller, he won 6 titles. He's been to 12 state championship games, 23 or 22 straight state tournament appearances.
It's insane.
He's a legend. He's a Hall of Famer. So absolutely, was there some stress and was there some anxiety? Yeah, there was. But for the most part, I would say it was excitement, because that 2016 group I thought was a special one. And guys like Connor Hellebus, Braden Thomas, who played for the Rams, now is up in the Canadian Football League, Seth Severson, Jordan Mann, Ernest Grant. Like, we had such a fun group. I was so excited to take over and have those guys, and I feel like that I was ready. And I'll never forget the day that Dave Zudelman walked in. I was in my advisory class and he had a basketball in his hands. He tossed it over to me. I caught it and he goes, "Congratulations, the job is yours." It was him and Jim Hausler, because it was right during the time where they were kind of Jim
Yep.
was leaving and Dave was taking over. And I'm just like, no way. Are you, like, serious? He goes, yep, congratulations. You know, that the job is yours. And I'll never forget, like, I could just see it so vividly in my mind, because it was a lifelong dream of mine. And thinking at 26 years old, being able to take over a special program like Bismarck High with the rich tradition that they have with, you know, being one of the all-time winningest programs, one of the oldest schools in the state. Definitely, you know, a watershed moment for me where you could see all the work that I had done and the time that I had put in, and the relationships that I had built, you know, all coming to fruition. It was a very cool experience for me, very cool moment. But it is a little daunting when you think at 26 years old, taking over a program, because I can't retire till 2049. So by that time, I'll have 35 years of coaching experience if I make it that long. We'll see. But definitely a little daunting when that's like your ultimate goal in life and your drive, and you get it at 26. You know, that is a little eye-opening, but definitely a very cool experience and something that I've had a blast with over the last 8 years. So I'm very appreciative of it.
That's impressive to take over at 26.
Yep.
I'm 29. I can't even imagine. I mean, I have a 1-year-old running in circles every day, but I'm sure I'll get used to that at some point. I know when
That's a
Jim
tougher job,
Patton,
man. Give yourself credit. That's a tougher job.
Truth. I know when Jim Patton left BHS and I was at Legacy coaching JV under Streeter, I know Streeter was kind of encouraging me to apply for the BHS job, which now Kinney has. And I thought about it. I'm like, I just got married. I'm hopefully going to have kids soon. I'm like, that's just going to be a lot. I feel like elementary teachers already have enough on their slate. I'm like, I don't think I could do enough justice for a lot of these guys and head coaches. A lot. Plus, I coached in BUFL, still do. So, like, I don't know if I want to juggle 2 seasons at 2 different times of the year. And honestly, it's pretty nice to leave BYFL practice and go, I don't have to go to practice for a very long time.
There is
It's a
nothing
lot.
wrong with that. That's absolutely fantastic. And that's the thing about coaching, man, is no matter what level you coach, no matter where you're working, if you're at the middle school, if you're at the high school, if you're coaching elementary, like the feeling that you get when you draw up a play and it's executed, the feeling that you get when you have a kid come to the sideline jacked about doing something right that you taught him the day before at practice, it's the same at every level. Like, is there levels to it? Sure. Is there notoriety to some things? And is some stuff mentioned in the Tribune and other things? Who cares about that? None of us are doing it for those reasons. You know, so when you get that feeling and you understand what coaching is all about, who cares what level you're doing? That's what's great about it. And that's, you know, something that you know, you have a lot of people that when they get into coaching, they want to be head coaches right now. And I know it worked out for me. So it sounds like, but at the same point, it's like, learn as much as you can, you know, be yourself, whatever level it happens to be, you know, fall in love with the craft first. So like when you're, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because like being a head coach, there is, and I said it earlier, how much that there is involved with it, you know, and you know, the 2 weeks now leading up to my season, going from off season to during the season, like how your gears start running, you start to sleep less, you start to worry more, you start to think, you're constantly, you know, what's next? What am I missing? Do I not have this done? Is my practice schedule ready? The parent meeting, the pictures, like there's, you know, and there's something to be said about showing up as an assistant sometimes too, and let's just coach, let's just create relationships, you know, or just like you mentioned, I'm going to be done at 5 o'clock and I'm going to go home and I'm not going to have to worry about watching huddle film until 9 o'clock at night. And, you know, so, you know, there's something to be said about it is all I got to say.
Correct. I chuckle that you say the worrying part, because you'd think as a 5th and 6th grade football coach who doesn't have any kids on the team, but we just had a 1-win season and it was the last game of the season. And I did not sleep much before that last game, but
Passionate, man.
it was a team that we had so many guys on our team. We started with 19. We had all these hurt guys, these guys who are sick, these guys who are, we played our last game with 14 guys.
Oh my God.
And apparently it was the right 14 because we pulled something off, but I don't even remember being that happy or excited for a group of kids after a win, because there's so many guys on that team that I'm like, you deserve one. Just give us one, for God's sake. I said, I know it's 6th grade football and I know I shouldn't be stressed about this. Like, I'm not stressed about playing. I'm like, I don't want to send any of these kids to middle school with a winless 6th grade. I don't want them to remember this. They need to remember the last game that we went out on top. And that's exactly what we did. We found something. It was a very stressful and frustrating football season, but we ended the way we needed to. So So when we talk about you take over the program, were there certain things that you wanted to keep, and were there certain things? I'm sure you had a lot of creativity, maybe some innovation going on in your mind. The second Zittelman told you were officially the new head guy. I'm sure there's plenty of philosophies from Coach Miller that you wanted to keep in the program, but what were some maybe things you also wanted to change and put your own little Coach Wilhelm spin on the program itself?
Um, to be honest with you, with the success that our system had, Coach Miller's system had for the previous 25 years, I did not have the guts to change anything. And what I mean by that is, like, as far as our defensive philosophy, our offensive philosophy, the offense that we run, the way we defend teams, man-to-man full court, or 3-out, 2-in motion, everything that he had run for 25 years, I wanted to maintain because it had worked, right? And it had been so successful for us. So as far as the X's and O's go, I wanted to keep things the same. Now, did I structure my practices differently? Yes. Coming from you, Mary, I knew I wanted to be a coach. So the things I liked and the things I didn't like, I always knew where I wanted to go with things. And I wanted practices to be shorter. I don't really believe in the 3 to 4 hour practices. I wanted them shorter. I don't want to spend 30 to 40 minutes doing one drill. I want it to be 5 to 10 minutes. If it isn't good, we're going to move on and come back to it the next day. I want to, there were little things that I wanted to change throughout the program. I think Coach Miller, he came from that Bobby Knight era where we're going to get after it for hours, man. And we're going to grind you down. And if it's not right, we're going to get it right. And that's totally fine because that's the way he coached. But that wasn't my philosophy and wasn't what I wanted to. So like little things like that I changed. But as far as his overall philosophy and his system that he had run for 25 years, I kept it the same. And for 4 years, I ran his system. And we had success. We made the state tournament my first 2 years as a head coach. And then with good teams, we missed the state tournament in back-to-back seasons in 18 and 19. And particularly in 2018, we started the year that year 9-0. We were ranked number 1 in the state. And there were some issues in the locker room and there were some issues within the team. And you could just feel how things were trending in the wrong direction and missed the state tournament that year. That was the first year that I missed the state tournament. And then the next year, had a really tough team, not quite as talented, missed it again. And, so for 4 years, I ran Coach Miller's system. And for the previous 2, I had a friend that his dad ran a system out in California and had changed everything. And their philosophy was completely different. And it was radical. And it was playing 12 guys and it was playing fast and it was pressing. And like everything I heard about and everything, I was so excited about it. And I just needed a reason to pull the trigger. So after 4 years, I changed my system to the style that we're now playing, where we play 12 to 13 guys and we press and we shoot threes and we want to score and we want to run. So it took me 4 years. And I don't even think it was a mistake because I think you had to have that system play out. And our personnel at Bismarck High has changed. Obviously with the addition of Legacy, our depth of talent, I guess you could say. I don't know. A lot of those guys that are at Legacy now would have been Bismarck High kids. And every year you could put out a 6'4", 6'5" kid to play inside for you. And we have gotten smaller, but we still have that pride and that passion that Bismarck High has been built on. So we changed our philosophy up in 2020. And now for the last 4 years, we're running something that I have become very passionate about, that I feel like is going to be around for a long time in our program. So, so that's kind of I probably got a little wordy there, but where we started from to where we've gone to now, as far as running Steve Miller's system and what he had kind of created and crafted, to now kind of putting my own spin on it after my 4th season as the head coach.
That was one of my curiosities, was where did the run and gun rotate 12 guys like crazy in? I remember it was probably your first year there. I'd never been to the redone Carl Guard, and one night I went in and 3 minutes into the game and the Demons have 4 new guys coming in. I'm like, what is happening right now? And some guy, I have no idea who he was, he turns around and goes, yo, it's their new offense. I'm like, what is going on? 3 minutes later, another. I'm like, this is not the Bismarck Demon offense I'm used to with pressing constantly and putting up a boatload of points, obviously, but it was definitely different to see than what I obviously was used to watching in all my years high school and going to Demon games growing up. So I did find it really interesting when you talked about how you structure your practices. It's been such a long day teaching and fathering that I can't even talk anymore.
I
Um,
know the feeling,
but how
man.
you said you did things a lot of the way they had been, and then you just started putting your own spin on it. And I feel like I can relate to it so much. As I've mentioned several times, I coach in the Bismarck Youth Football League, and I coach with my dad. He was the coach of the Saints. He's been coaching for 36 years, I think it was. But I think every year I find something that I not actually want to take away or change, but it's just the tweaks here and there. I know you maybe even from your teacher mindset of we're not going to run a drill for 30 to 45 minutes. We're going to go. We're going to change things. And I mean, I have sixth graders and fifth graders. You have high school kids. So the attention span's a little bit different, but I've just noticed through observations as a coach, more so not just looking at the practice plan saying this is what we're doing, we got to go, but be more observant. I think the last 2 years we've become a lot more productive. I call it make football fun again. We do drills at the end of practice, just wild stuff. I mean, we're playing razzle dazzle at the end of practice, which my dad would have never done ever. But I just find it interesting that you've just continually added your own spins just because I'm sure you see things, and I'm sure it made basketball more fun for your players with just the different style of things you're doing. I also have never understood we're gonna work our tails off for 3 hours and then
Right.
we're gonna go watch film for an hour, and then you can maybe go home and eat something. But interesting to see the similarities there, and I enjoy every bit of it. So
Well, I like what you mentioned about like my dad wouldn't have done this, and like same thing with me, like Steve Miller wouldn't have done this, and I think that's important for your listeners or whoever's listening to understand that about whatever it is that you're doing. How many of us have mentors in our life that we think are great, and we have people in our life that we think are great, moms and dads and this and that, but they're your mom, they're your dad, they're your mentor, they're your coach, they're your teacher, they're not you, right?
mhm.
And I think that you ultimately have to be able to find out who you are and then stick with who you are and be confident in who you are and coach to your own strengths and your own abilities rather than what you learned, and I think that's what's so tough sometimes is when you have such a great coach, when you have a Mark Gibson or a Steve Miller in your life and that's who you play for, you want to emulate the things that they do. But at the same point, like if I walked into a practice and I started to coach the way Mark Gibson or Steve Miller did, I think my guys would look at me out of the corner of their eye
Mhm.
like who are you pretending to be today? Like this isn't you. Are there days that I need to maybe shift practice a certain way? Sure, but I mean that's just not my style. It's not who I am. So I think being able to coach to your strengths and know who you are is a very important part of coaching, teaching, leadership, whatever it is that you're doing. So I like that you had mentioned that.
Absolutely. So kind of moving on to another topic. So a lot of not just basketball fans, but sports fans are hopefully aware that there is a lot of talent and skill in our area. I know we just got done with football season, so you have all sorts of debates, arguments, east, west. I mean, at different classes, I guess there's different conversations, but in the WDA, as you are obviously well aware since you took over, there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of skill that you guys have to compete with. I know you mentioned when Bismarck High had to split and Legacy popped up, you have Century, you have Mandan's always got some athletes. Minot's always got a ton of talent with a lot of good coaching. I'm sure I'm missing plenty of schools. Century, of course, is always got some juggernaut going on up north. But how have you continually been able to compete with these schools that are like constantly putting out D1 talent? I know you talked about how you revamped your entire offense, and I'm looking at scores and every winter, and it's BHS is putting up 88 points and they're losing by 12 just because of how you guys play sometimes. But how are you able to take I know you even talked about the lack of size. You guys kind of live and die by the three-pointer some nights. How have you guys continually been able to compete with what you have at Bismarck High versus some of these D1, some of these D2 products that other schools are putting out? I know you've had college talent, whether it's just athletes going for basketball, football, baseball, whatever. But how have you continually been able to compete with these schools each and every year?
Yeah, it's a testament to our league, man. I think WDA basketball is the most well-coached league. I think it's the most well-coached sport, top to bottom, in our state. I mean, you could argue it. You go across our league with Dean Winchesky. He started mine out. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's a 6-time state champ. Darren Mattern is a 2-time state champ. He'll probably be a Hall of Famer. Jason Horner has a state championship when he was coaching over in Mandan. A ton of wins. We have guys all over the place in our league that have experience, that know what they're doing. And that's the thing about, and there's talent across our league, and there's high level talent. Of course, I've had some talented kids. I mean, Gunnar Swanson playing out at Mary right now, hits 4 threes in the game last night against Mayville. He's starting, played 43 minutes, playing a ton of minutes out there. Trayson Eaglestaff, Division I kid. I've had guys that have gone on. I could go down the list with the Ian Schaefers and the Joe Johners, and I've had guys. But you're right, as far as top to bottom talent, in order to compete with the Centuries and the Minots, that a lot of years can go 6'7", 6'6", 6'5", and they're sending guys D2 and they're sending guys D1, and they got guys playing, Derek Dissett playing at NDSU. You talk about last year's Century team with 2 kids that are D2, Isaiah Schaefer, who could have played Division I. He had offers Division I. He'll be a senior this year. William Ware, who's up at Minot State, and then the 2 kids, Doppler and Erickson up at UND. In order to be able to compete with teams like that, that was the problem, is the way we played before, when you played a slow tempo, when we walked the ball up the court and we would grind possessions, what happened is we were never in rebounding positions. So if we were to miss a shot, we were guaranteed, because we were undersized, we were never going to get an offensive rebound. A lot of people say that in order to win games when you have less talent, you want to limit possessions. I went exactly the other way. I wanted more possessions. I want to play. I want to go. Let's play fast. Let's do things that other people aren't doing. I think another part of my philosophy is that when you're doing too much thinking, you're going to have a hard time executing and being successful. I think at any level, even when you're spending more time analyzing and thinking, you're going to have a hard time. So I want my guys reacting and being athletes. And like I mentioned, at Bismarck High, man, I think that there is a rich tradition and a rich history and guys that take pride in what we do. And you could come back to Bismarck High at any point over the break, and you'll see that pride, because I have alumni at my practices. Shoot, last year, I think I had 16 dudes come to one practice, and they're putting their jerseys on and they want to come back, and they're at the games. They're communicating, sending texts, giving me calls. Over half of my staff are former Bismarck High guys, because people, they want to come back, they want to coach, they want to be a part of it. So I think that pride has never dwindled since the run we had from 2000 to 2012. Now, I know we haven't won one since 2010, but I think our guys still carry themselves with that pride and that excellence, that Bismarck High, that I'm proud of as a head coach. But the things that we've done, I think, to maintain the success that we have is changing that system. And I think it is very much so helped us when guys like Cade Cavisto, who's 5'5", can play 10 to 12 minutes.
Former player.
Yeah, he's a former player for you?
Yeah, I coached the Chargers with Chase Dinga back in the day before I went to Hazen. I had all the Cavistos. I had Caden Fisher, the Cavistos, Brady Bauman, all those guys who had turned out to be some studs.
I mean, Cavisto is on my Mount Rushmore of one of the favorite kids I've ever coached. He comes back to over Christmas, and I remember last year, Penny's he's not going to be any good. I'm I guarantee you something's going to happen. I mean, we're 2 possessions in, he takes a charge. The 3rd possession, he steals it from our guys, dives onto his knees, throws it over his head. They get a layup going the other way. I stop practice, put my guys in the line. I'm sprinting them. They're just hooting and hollering. Because he doesn't, I mean, it's a year and a half after he's done playing, and he's back in practice with that same pride that he had before. But, that's part of what we've had going on, is that we can find roles for guys that traditionally would not have maybe made it in a lot of programs in a traditional setting, because they can just, if you can play hard, if you can be in your face, if you can sprint as hard as you can for 2 minutes, we can find a spot for you. We can find a place for you. And I think that has reignited some energy into the program, because now guys know that if I go and I work and I show that I can be accountable and I can do the things that coach is asking, that I'm going to get an opportunity. So I think that is a big thing that we've had going on, is that new style and the new belief. And then when you see success, I'll be honest, by far the most tight I've ever been going into a game is when we played Fargo North in 2019, 2020, that very first year, because we made the leap of faith and changed everything up. And we played at Fargo North the very first game. And I had no idea if we're going to lose by 50 or win by 50. but I knew it was going to be something. And very first game of the program, and this helps when you have guys that buy in, that senior class with Nick Hintz and Tice Halter and Cade Rolfs and Kenny Eagle and Joey Mills, like they completely bought into our system. And that very first game, we broke the school record for threes made, and we broke the school scoring record the very first game out. So when you have success, the very first game, when you put in a new system against a good Fargo North team, I think right there, the guys are kind of looking at each other like, that was fun. We got to shoot. We got to play hard. We got to play fast. And you win a game. You make a bunch of threes. And then that very first year, we go to the state tournament, and we're in the Final Four before the tournament got canceled because of COVID. When you have that type of success in your first year making a change like that, I think it really just ignites top to bottom your program. So definitely been fun moving to that style and that system. And I think our guys have bought into it.
I love it. Buy-in does a lot for you.
Yep.
No matter job, school, team, anything, buy-in. As a guy just not even teaching for 10 years yet, it's amazing what buy-in from a crowd or a group of people can do.
No doubt, man.
Your Cade Cavisto moment does not surprise me at all. That is how he was in 5th and 6th grade. And there was even other coaches from other teams going, this guy's motor is unreal. Like, yeah, love having him on my team because he's like that 100% of the time, and I love it. So I did highlight one thing you said about coaches thinking too much, because I love that you said that, because I've been told that literally mid-game of football games. Again, I know coaching high school is different than coaching youth football and being an offensive coordinator for a bunch of 12-year-olds, but there have been games where we were beating a team that we certainly should not have been beating, or there are games that we were somehow like competing with the team that should not have been close to our talent level. And in my head early on as a young coach, I'm like, I need to change something. We need to run the clock out. We need to run some clock here. But again, it goes back to your whole quit thinking so much and stick to your guns, stick to what you're good at. And I know another one that just popped in my head is Mark Gibson. He doesn't do anything fancy. He doesn't do anything special. You know what's coming, but you have to stop it. Back when the Bison, well, they still do run power A gap, but everyone knows what they're running, but they're going to run it and they're better than you. So they're just going to run right through you. So I love that you highlighted that a lot of coaches, especially when they go up against teams that this isn't going to go very well. We need to change something. We need to be different when you don't have to be different. Quit thinking so much and stick to your guns. I also think of, I'm not sure if you've watched the Florida Gators, the Swamp Kings documentary on Netflix yet.
I've been told I need to, but I've not watched it yet.
It's absolutely fantastic. But yeah. Urban Meyer tells a story about, oh man, I think it was one of Tim Tebow's years that he was sitting in the lobby of their hotel on Friday night before they played a big SEC game, and one of his assistant coaches who had been there forever said, "You seem nervous or upset or frustrated about something." He's like, "I don't know what we're going to do tomorrow. We're supposed to win tomorrow, and I don't like this." And he literally said, "Let the mother effers go." And he wrote down on his play sheet, "Let the mother effers go." And then they kind of panned forward to the game, and they faked a punt at their own 9-yard line. He's like, "I don't know what we're going to do." He's like, "Let's run a fake punt. Just let the mother effers go." I'm like, I love it. I actually watched that midway through our football season, and I was going to write it on my play sheet, but some 12-year-old would probably see it in the huddle and tell his mom about it or something. So,
yeah, probably not the best idea, but I love it.
I love the terminology, and it's totally an Urban Meyer thing to say. So,
yeah.
So you've done a fantastic job with building your culture, building your team. As you've mentioned so many times already, you have all these guys coming back, which means they enjoyed playing in your system. They enjoyed playing for you. They enjoyed playing with their teammates. I'm sure there's so many things that go into the fact that all these alumni come back so often simply to basketball practice and to play with the current team. How have you seen over the past couple of years kind of this culture build up? I know you guys even take some of your practices to Wachter so that Wachter basketball players can see you. They can kind of see who you are as a coach. They can see how you guys run things. I know I will slip in that you've done a great job out at Lincoln. I know we've done a lot to get more and more Lincoln kids. I think we break our attendance record every single year, and that's
shattered this year. That was because of you. I appreciate that, by the way.
Yeah, well, just trying to get more and more Lincoln kids in. They talk about it and then they don't go do it, and it's like, well, well, I can't really help you if you don't go do it. But it's been awesome to see the pictures you sent me in the summer of our camps, and it's been awesome to see the numbers go up. I know you had some really cool stories about kind of your guys' ending meeting before camp was over, and a lot of kids were eager to get home and continue to practice their basketball skills. But since you took over, what are some of the kind of the coolest memories or experiences you've had of kind of this program continually building on itself?
Well, early on, we had to teach it every year to every group that came in, so you're and that's what's difficult about it is when it's one thing to say that you want to play fast. It's one thing to say that you want to press. It's another thing to know how to do it. Because as fast as we play, there is a method to what we do. And I think being able to, you can't just sprint and play fast and catch the ball and score. Like, you need to understand what your footwork looks like. And especially as a coaching staff, early on, I'll never forget when we first put it in. It was the summer before, it was 2019, the summer of 2019. And it was at my team camp, the Capital City Classic. We're playing Mandan at Horizon. And Elijah Klein had probably 50 points against us. We lost by 40 plus. It was one of the very first games that we had this new system in. And I remember at halftime, we're down by 20. And Hintz and Halter walk into the huddle like, what do we got to do? They're just, they're breaking the press every time. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I had no idea, because it was so new to me and it was so fast. Not only was it tough for our guys to know like what they were supposed to do, but even for us to be able to coach it. Because when things are moving that fast and things are breaking down, even knowing how to coach it. So now, after spending 4 years with the system, within this system, and now after working with my whole staff and then working with Coach Hansen and Coach Mickey down at Wachter, they come up to a practice every year. I've sat down with them. They watch the videos. So now we are 7th grade through 12th grade program wide. Everybody's running our stuff. Everybody's running our offense and our defense. So by the time they get to us as freshmen, they know a lot of the terminology. They understand some of the basic concepts. We've ran some practices down there, so we've seen us in the gym. So by the time they get to us as juniors and seniors, this will be our 5th year. So our seniors this year, we're running it in 8th grade. So this will be our 5th year running the system. So I think for me, one of the coolest things is just being able to see how that initial thought and having the guts to talking to my assistants and all of us just being like, let's go for it, man. Let's change it up. Let's try something fresh. Just going from a thought to teaching one group to it, to now us 7th grade through 12th grade, everybody understanding it, knowing it, everybody coaching it, everyone being on board, and it no longer being a question mark of why are they doing this, to now loving the fact that we're doing this. And this is what Demon basketball is built on. Another thing that I still get from a lot of people across the community are, what do you do when you have a guy that's a really good player and you want to play him more minutes? It's like, well, he's going to go to the bench. It's what it is. Guess what? Trayson Eaglestaff was Mr. Basketball. He scored 1,600 points. He broke every scoring record we have at Bismarck High, playing 24 to 25 minutes a game. He wasn't playing 34. I mean, his senior year, he played like 22 and a half or 23 minutes a game, and he got like 24 shots up in those 23 minutes. When you can get 24 shots up in 23 minutes, I don't think it matters how, like, you're getting more shots up than everybody else, because the pace we play at, the tempo we play at, we're getting more possessions than everyone else. So I think early on, there was a lot of question marks around it, a lot of alumni and people across the community thinking, what is this guy doing? Like, why would you want to change what, and I think for us, being able to see it come to light and have success and have belief, and now being able to watch guys like Gunner and Max Chosick go to BSC, Trayson Eaglestaff, he went off the other night against Elon, and now seeing guys like Andre Austin come up as a sophomore, averaging 17, 7, and 7 last year. And the success we've had has just been really cool, seeing it kind of blossom and seeing the energy that it has brought and kind of instilled within the program. I think has been one of the cooler things that I've seen.
So you mentioned his name several times right there with big man Trayson Eaglestaff. Obviously, we've talked about first Mr. Basketball from Bismarck High, which still boggles my mind that he's the first one. That there's been so many studs and so many great players at BHS that even when you said he was the first one, I'm like, I suppose Dexter didn't win it. And there's a few names I could think of that it's just crazy that they probably either took second, third, or were just in the conversation. But as a coach, kind of in your I guess beginning years of your coaching career, to be able to coach a guy like Trayson, and I know you've talked about kind of his perspective, his work ethic, his love for the game of basketball. I know you have a pretty famous story from when you guys went out to the cities to play and he wanted to go shoot hoops at like 7 o'clock in the morning. But what was it like as a coach to have a guy like Trayson, and how did you find ways to continually drive him to not just be stagnant? I feel like there's athletes, I wouldn't say so many athletes, but there's players who would maybe I'm already good. I don't know what I need to work on. There's some players who aren't very coachable. They're not very accountable. But as you know, and I know, Trayson is the complete opposite of all of that. So as a coach, what was it like coaching a guy like Trayson?
Trayson was just so self-driven, and he was so self-motivated, and he is so obsessed with his craft that I had to do the opposite with him. I needed to tell him to go to sleep. I needed to tell him to sleep in. I needed to tell him to take an hour and relax. It was immediately following every game of his career, 6 a.m. tomorrow, 6 a.m. tomorrow. And for the first 3 years of his career, it was, yep, I'll meet you there, 6 a.m. I'll get the gun out. I'll rebound for you. I'll do whatever. I got you. And it came to the point where later in his career, you could see he was wearing down and he was getting gassed. And it kind of came to light at the end of his junior year. That's a year that I think that kind of gets slept on in our, program history now is 2022 when he was a junior. We had as good a shot as anybody that season. We had a layup to win it. Gunner had a layup to win it at the end of regulation to win our second straight WA title. Just missed it, rims around. The next possession, we ran a backdoor for Trayson. He goes up, tries to lay it in, lands on his back, messes his back up. And that season, he didn't practice the entire week going into state and was maybe 50% in that first round game against West Fargo, and they went on to win it. Now, I'm not using that as an excuse, but we didn't have a chance to really make a run in 2022. And then again, in 2023, Trayson's senior year, you could see down the stretch, the last few games of the regular season and then into the tournament, how he was still fantastic, but just a little bit worn down. So for me, it was more like, dude, go home, go to sleep, communicating with mom. Is he at home? Is he in bed? Like, no, he's at the Y. It's 9:30. How long has he been at the Y? Practice has been over since 5. He's been at the Y for 4 hours. As much as it was, for me, it was more the other way, and it was being in his ear and making sure you're supporting him, but at the same time, like almost going the other direction with him. But it's one of those things when you read stories, when you listen to guys that truly make it and truly are successful at the Division I level that eventually go on to the professional level, when you read Kobe stories, when you read MJ stories, when you hear about the all-time greats, when you hear about the best guys you've ever had, that's how they're driven. And everything about them, they eat, they sleep, they breathe, their basketball is their pillow. That was Trayson. Just absolutely obsessed with his craft. Any type of way that he's feeling, he's going to the gym. Some people, when they have rough weeks and something's going on, when they turn to substance abuse, they turn to negative decisions. When Trayson feels a type of way, he's going to the gym. When Trayson's feeling motivated, he's going to the gym. So that's his answer. That's his where he likes to be. That's his play. So it was very special for me to be around a kid like that, to watch him work, to be with him at practice every day. And the thing about Trayson is he was one of the, if not the biggest competitor I ever coached. I'll never forget a practice he had up in the Lynch in 2022 that year with Gunner. It was hard for us to make practices competitive because our varsity team was very solid that year, and Trayson's teams usually won. So one practice, he was mad. I put Trayson on a team with all JV kids, and I put the rest of the varsity on the other team. And I think he scored 400 points that practice. Like it was one of those things where he wins, and it was all competitive. It was all team that practice. And I remember looking like Gunner and Max and Schaber looking at each other like what just happened? Because he was a competitor, man. And if it was a defensive drill, all of a sudden he was going to be the best defender. If it was a rebounding drill, he was going to kill somebody to get the rebound. It didn't matter what it was. He was going to try and win. So, you talk about a very special athlete, a very special kid, someone that I was very blessed to be able to coach, and still be able to follow his career and talk to him. It was pretty neat. And he earned every second of that Mr. Basketball. So pretty proud to be able to say that I got to be able to coach him. Absolutely.
Big shout out to Trayson Eaglestaff. He's doing his thing up at UND, and in the very early stages of his college career, which is really cool to see. And I'm sure it doesn't surprise you whatsoever what he's been able to do. So I smile at your Trayson and Logan Schaubert, as Logan and I talk quite often. He's another former player of mine, obviously a former player of yours, but when they had Trayson mic'd up at the one practice and you shared it, and Logan commented, Eagle staff talked more in that 2-minute segment than he did in 4 years of high school.
He's not lying. He's not lying either. Schaubert's exactly right. Yeah, as hard of a worker Trayson was, he was not a communicator on the defensive side. It was funny when they had him mic'd up. Just help, D-Bay, deny.
I'm watching the video. I'm like, I don't know Trayson that well. He did a really, really good job at Lincoln. I was super impressed with, because I know he's surrounded by 600 elementary school kids that all just want his autograph, for God's sake. So when he walked into Lincoln, I know I told him before he left, and I know he wants to do a lot of things on the reservation with kind of the impact that he could make. But I know I told him he did a really good job doing that, because he did a fantastic job. I still have students who are fifth graders now, and some formers at Wachter now that still talk about him. So I think they're still following his career, which is even cooler to hear about from young people. But I had to laugh, because in that video, I'm like, I don't think Trayson's usually this vocal. And I scroll down, and Logan Schaubert, he's like, this kid's never been like this. What did you guys do to him?
Well, Schaubert was mad because that was him in practice. He was the energy guy. So I'm sure there were times that he was frustrated because Trayson wasn't on that level communication wise. So for him to see Trayson like that, I'm sure he had to take a shot at him. That was good stuff.
So kind of in closing, before we sign off, our friend Coach Brent DeCook, it's been just over 2 years since we lost him to his battle. So I'm going to ask you if you have any stories or any kind of memories that you might want to share with the audience. Obviously, you coached against him. You probably knew him a lot better than I did. I know me personally, I knew him from the YMCA, but he continually has an impact on me, especially from the youth aspect. Again, I had coached high school baseball, but a lot of me is being on the board and being a big part of BYFL, which of course is around younger people and youth football players. But I think for myself with Coach DeCook, just observing him when I used to ref games at the YMCA, I know there's years where he would coach his daughter's team, and he was well aware that they were probably the least talented team in their league, but he still showed up, and just kind of the encouraging. And I know you've been to the Y plenty of times to see the coaches that think that their 10-year-old daughters are being scouted by the WNBA that Saturday morning. But I know just working there, and I'd always asked to be on Coach DeCook's court, because he was always just passionate, just the way he carried himself. But again, just as a youth coach, he still lives in my mind every fall on remember why you're here. You're not here to win BYFL titles, nor do I give two craps about winning youth football titles. But any stories or memories with Coach DeCook from his basketball days at St. Mary's?
Well, I did, for your listeners, on my podcast, I did do a Brent DeCook special last year, where I compiled probably, 15 to 20 stories of different former players and coaches and people that were with him. And I shared some of my thoughts on that one as well. So you can go back and listen to that if anyone wants to hear more about Coach DeCook. But for me, he was someone that early on in my career, when I started, my very first experience with him was my very first year coaching football. Obviously, my only experience with football was playing for Coach Gibson. Didn't have the playing experience like I did in basketball. And coming back, I want to do new, fresh stuff. I want to do whatever it is. And I knew that he had coached out in Minnesota before he had moved to Bismarck football. And football was a passion of his. And I remember coming to him to get thoughts and ideas for coaching wide receivers. And he's, come in anytime you want. He sits down, long list, writes me notes, draws up a bunch of stuff, gave me a bunch of cool new ideas. I still remember like 3 or 4 of them that I used, for 5 years. Like great wide receiver drills, one of my first experiences. Next thing with him, every time you coach against him, you could just feel his passion in the way he handled himself on the sideline. I loved his sideline demeanor. He's just a little spitfire. And he got after it. Did he get after it, fishes a little bit like any of us? Of course he did. But for the most part, you could just see how much his kids loved him, how much he loved his players. Someone that I talked to 2 or 3 times a week. Constantly we're calling to talk, to communicate about whoever you were playing against, who reffed the game, how did your kids do, what did you think of these guys? Someone I always bounced ideas off of. But the biggest thing for me with Coach DeCook, as far as his personality, is just how much he passionately cared and loved his peers, how much he passionately cared and loved his players. There were years that they were extremely good, like 2014 when they went to the finals and lost to that Davies team.
Ben Weisbeck and Darius Sparks here.
Darius Sparks, yeah. I mean, so he had teams that were as high level as you can get. And then he had teams that really had a hard time and didn't have a ton of talent. But one thing his teams always did is they were playing their best basketball at the end of the year. And the other thing about him is he was always very creative. Like when you played against a Brett DeCook team, you knew he was going to be prepared for your team, number one, and you knew he was always going to have some new wrinkle, right? He ran the dribble drive motion offense, which is what I ran as well. And every time you'd play him, he had a goal coming in. Is he going to backdoor you this game? Is he going to hit you with threes this game? Is he going to play a zone against you? Is he not going to play a zone? And he wasn't afraid to take chances. And then down to his last, days, man, just the passion, how positive he was. And then that quote that he always mentioned, how he wants the light that shines on you to not be as important as the light that shines through you. Or I forget exactly how he worded it, but he always wanted to be the things that you were saying, the things that you portrayed yourself as a coach, to be more important than that light shining on you. So it wasn't about the headlines in the paper. It was the things that you were saying and the things that you were portraying to your athletes, and that he always led with that first and wanted to make sure that that's where he was at. So another guy that I'm proud to be able to spend time with, that I'll never forget the time that I got to spend with him. And his passion, his pride, and the things that he represented himself with are things that are instilled in me. I still have a picture of him hanging on my fridge that I look at every day because I want him with me and the things that I do. So definitely someone that I am passionate about and very fortunate to have been able to spend time with.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining me. That is all I've got, unless you have anything else, any other questions. But again, thanks for joining me. I know you guys start season here soon, so I wish you the best of luck, and I'll hopefully get little man to the Carl Guard so I can show him where it all began. We might have to go stand in the student section, really give him a piece of what it's like to be a Demon. But again, good luck this year. Hopefully your guys' off season did you well, and hopefully you guys can get off to a good start and have a great season. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, head boys basketball coach at BHS, Coach Jordan Wilhelm. You can also find his podcast. I believe I listen to it on Spotify, the Jordan Wilhelm Podcast. He has a bunch of not just basketball personnel, but so many great sports people in our community. So make sure to go check that out. So anything else from you, Willie?
You're the man, dude. Enthusiasm is our jam. I appreciate you having me on and for everything you do for the youth in Bismarck, dude. So keep it up.
Appreciate you. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you later. I'll probably see you in the drop-off line at daycare tomorrow. So
sounds good, my man. We'll see ya.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right.